Thank you very much. As everybody, I'm very happy to be here. Actually, I was thinking in the break that my last conference before pandemics was in Istanbul. The first one is in Istanbul again. So I hope it's a very good start for a new academic activity in the field. I will share with you some ideas about how this period in the history of Istanbul was seen from a small country perspective, let's say, from Romania, and basically from the legation of Romania, which at that time was on Sıraselviler Caddesi near Taksim, so in a very center of events. Okay, so in this great diplomatic para, in one corner we can find also the representatives of Romania, and just very briefly, because as I said, it's part of the small countries, not the great powers. It was a legation. In this case, it was not an embassy, and that's why I keep using the mention. And the story starts in 1978 when the Romanian independence was recognized after the Treaty of Berlin, and the legation was open until 1916 when Romania joined the First World War, sorry. And for a long time, in my perspective as well, that was kind of a stop of diplomatic relations, and in a way the end of the relations between Romania and the Ottoman Empire. Like in other cases, all the celebrations which took place in 2018 and 2019, especially in Romania, to mark the creation of Great Romania after the First World War, determined myself to look a little bit what happened during the war and what happened after that, after the war, and crossing in a way this mental border I created by myself, that was the end, 1916. And as always, I discovered there were many interesting things, and life was going on and diplomatic activity was going on in a different perspective. Coming back to the legation of Romania in Pera, first it was housed in different places around Pera, in Ciucurgiuma or in Rumkărbistan, Caddesi, in rented houses. And only from 1903, we found the delegation on Sıraselviler Caddesi. The Romanian state basically rents a beautiful stone konak. I will show it to you immediately. And then from 1905 starts all the procedure to buy it. And in 1907 becomes a property of the Romanian state. And it's still today a property of the Romanian state, that's hosted for a long time, the Romanian consulate, and now the Romanian Cultural Institute in Istanbul. While small country trying to find such a beautiful place to be represented, because it was a time when Romania was trying to, first in the Ottoman Empire, acquiring prestige as a former vassal of the Ottoman Empire, but also in the Balkans, they were trying to impose themselves as a regional power. They were trying to have as much connection as possible around and to influence all the foreign relations in the area, as I said, especially in the Balkans. How much prestige they acquired is debatable. I won't insist very much on it. If we look on the map, the famous map, 26, I had to put the red point. The Belgium legation is mentioned on the map. The Romanian is not mentioned. In next maps, I checked, it was there. So finally it was, but already it was a consulate. As I said, when you pass by just across Triada Church in Taksim, you can still see this beautiful mansion, which was well preserved, and it still keeps the character from the end of the 19th century outside and inside, no matter how many decades pass by. And I have to say that my interest in the history of this building, and which takes me also to the history of the people, the Romanian people in the Ottoman Empire and later in Turkey came from the fact that I used to work in this building. So somehow I felt obliged to check its history and so on. I used to work at the Romanian Cultural Institute for 9 years, and my office was on the second floor, basically in the building. Beginning of the war, as I said, Romania was neutral for 2 years. This was the last plenipotentiary minister before the war. Very debatable and a lot discussed in Romanian historiography diplomat, because especially in Istanbul, he had not a very successful mission. He was very busy attending all kinds of parties and receptions and so on, and preferred to leave all the duties on the hands of Emanuel Rosetti Rosnovanu, with whom we see here in the picture on Sirkeci station in 1915. And even the moment when Romania entered the war, the plenipotentiary minister was on holiday in Romania, so he didn't come back to Istanbul, and it was the same Emanuel Rosetti Rosnovanu who was in charge with organizing everything at the legation. During the war, also just very shortly perspective, so 2 years of neutrality. On the left is a cartoon from the Romanian magazine showing the king, Carol I, who was of German origin, Hohenzollern, and who was not happy at all with the decision of neutrality. He felt like against his roots. And the text here, it's actually a wordplay mentioning that nici cu țarul, nici cu țara, nici cu neamul, nici cu neamțul, nici cu neamul, which means we are not with the Tsar, with the Russian Tsar, but with the țara, with the country. We are not with the German, with Namts, but with the people, with Namu. So an explanation of this neutrality of Romania. And at the end, as it is well known, on the 13th of August 1916, Romania joined the war. And as I said, it was the end of the diplomatic relations. And the story goes on. I don't insist on what happened with the occupation of parts of Romania, especially Bucharest. And then 7th of May 1918 is the treaty which was signed near Bucharest in Bufta, and which mentioned also the resumption of diplomatic relations. Following the international context, Romania decided to have a special delegate of the royal government in the Ottoman Empire, who was in charge with everything for two years. Coming to occupied Istanbul, just a very short comment. I was thinking yesterday while listening to Odin Moreau, and when she mentions the case of the Romanian principalities under the Russian occupation, I was thinking of the terminology. In Romanian historiography, you never find our military occupation. It's very well avoided. Now it makes me very curious to check when it was imposed another term, only protectorate, Russian protectorate, and even it's a protectorate which lasted for 2 decades, it's a protectorate. It gives also this positive aspect. If we look, while it was avoided military occupation, that's the subject to research. Maybe the term was much more imposed in the communist period, according to the official historiography. That's just a question. It came to my mind yesterday while listening to your talk. So what happened on Sıraselviler Street? On August 1916, they had, of course, the diplomats were supposed to leave Istanbul, and Rosnovan was the one who took care of all the Romanian diplomats, both consuls and members of the legation, to leave through Sofia, and they had quite a safe journey back to Romania. And the building was closed, and the archive and sealed, and the archives and the protection was given to the Spanish legation, and they were taking care of the affairs also of the Romanian subjects in the Ottoman Empire during the last 2 years of the war. But already this person I was mentioning, Epaminonda Papacosta, started to appear in the correspondence. While I was checking the diplomatic correspondence between Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Spanish minister in Istanbul, his name popped up several times. So, of course, I wonder who was it, and I understood that he was the one chosen in 1918 to be the special delegate of Romania. Why he? Because he was in Istanbul, basically. He used to work at the Romanian legation. He had started quite earlier, from 1905, as a chavush, and then became a dragoman and interpreter, and was at the beginning of Romanian involvement in the war. He was an interpreter, but he was an Ottoman subject, so he was not asked to leave the Ottoman Empire. So he was the very easiest solution for the Romanian state to ask. And while checking the Romanian archives, became clear that he was in charge, and he was to ask to take the keys back from the Spanish legation and the archive and take care of everything. And sounds smoothly and well-organized activity. While in the next minutes, I will explain that was not exactly like that, nothing happened. The other person who we see in the documents is Philaliti, who came as an official diplomat in 1920. He was the minister actually till 1927. He was the one who was supposed to move to Ankara, but he stayed as much as possible in Istanbul, like other diplomats, and running everything from Istanbul, and just going from time to time to Ankara when it was really necessary. On a longer term, that cost actually the Romanian state the fact that they don't have now property in Ankara where they could have built a residence in interwar periods. So because he was pushing the moment, postponing the moment to arrive in Ankara, no land received from the Turkish state, and they were keep renting and so on and so on. It was only in 1960 that Romanians at the end built an embassy in Ankara. And these two representatives, as I said, one the special delegate, one the other one, the minister, were keep writing reports and sending to Bucharest, mentioning a lot of information about what happened in Istanbul, observing as much as possible from the windows of Sıraselviler, Mutsuz Pasha, Conal, the life and the changes and the very turbulent period in Istanbul. But I decided actually for today just to give you the impressions from a different report. This time is a report written by a military who was sent in a very short mission to Istanbul in spring 1919. And he was sent just to bring, as I said, to some cartridges and guns. It's a very specific activity. But on the way back to Bucharest, he decided to write also a 24 pages report type, actually, in Romanian, and of course send it to General Secretariat of the Ministry of War, to describe the atmosphere in Istanbul. And Polichroniad, the name of the colonel, divided his report according to a few ideas. At the very beginning, he mentions that at the entrance of our allies, all the Talats and Envers disappeared together with the German agents, the most visible one. However, the power and influence stays in the hand of this occult group. And in his report, he keeps repeating that even they disappeared, they are controlling from behind. His whole report is about spies and occult groups and all these kind of images of Istanbul. And then he divided his report on what he calls military aspects, and he insists on several pages about the relations between different ethnic groups and his observation, and especially on the Greeks And he mentioned several times that it's a very difficult relation between the Turks and the Greeks. And he gives an example like between us, the Romanians, and the Jews, which was not very nice after several decades after the Treaty of 1878, when Romania was asked to give. To accept as subjects the Jews, but that gives us an idea how it stays in the mind and explains in a way all the reactions in interwar, anti-Jewish reactions in Romania in interwar period. On the Bulgarians, again, it said that they are like the second enemies for the Turks in Istanbul, while the Romanians have no problems and they are well accepted. And he's very pleased to mention several times that the relations are very good and he's not observing anything like that. Greek propaganda is another subject he mentions, and how the Greek community prepares itself to take back Constantinople. It's his discourse again and again repeated, like manifestations he sees on the street, and different actors who are trying to create shows in which they emphasize the Byzantine memory of Constantinople, so on. And of course, the military finally goes to military aspects, and he gives a detailed information about what happened to the Ottoman military equipment, how much was Caesar, and his conclusion is that Turkish army is just an expression right now. Sorry. And on the political situation, he emphasized this for the spring 1919, the bad image of the French army. And his explanation is, I'm quoting here, that the French, with their characteristic more spirit, entered everywhere in the most beautiful houses, inns, and hotels. The offices are installed in a great luxury. Their action is extremely loud. Their newspaper, Istanbul, for example, very noisy. Active ads and many business are even led by career officers, while he cannot keep his admiration for the British army, mentioning all the time that they are very serious and they impose themselves by their seriousness, by their discretion, by their complete absence from any manifestation or advertisements. And he has his conclusion that they will succeed to control Istanbul because they are much more serious, as I said, compared to the French soldiers. And also is analyzing the position of Italians. He tries as much as possible to create a general image of the armies, of the allies present who are in Istanbul, mentioning all the time that these are the observation of an officer. Maybe nobody will pay attention to them, but I felt obliged because I was there and I was a witness of all these aspects. And then the second part of his report, he focused on our situation in Orient, meaning a Romanian situation in Orient. It's a very short part because his conclusions is Romanians are only one drop in this ocean of passion and interest, and we are totally ignored. And then more pages focusing on the legation and what happened to the legation in 1918 and 1919, and a lot of information is given on the special delegate, Epaminonda Papacosta, and it's a very aggressive campaign towards this person. He's mentioning that actually Epaminonda Papacosta managed after 1916 to take the keys of the legation from the Spanish diplomat, convincing that the building will be much more protected if he's living inside. And he was living inside, and he was giving parties, and he was hosting different people, and he was very well cooperating with the Ottomans, which of course is very revolting for our military. And he gives all a very, very negative image of this representative, who's mentioning the lack of culture and morality. Of course, after reading the official correspondence and coming to this report, which actually was found by chance by a colleague of mine, Daniel Kain, and in a National Library of Romania, and he just sent it to me and said, look, what's going on here? It's a different story. I started to dig on the topic, and I realized that this Epaminonda Papacosta had a bad reputation from the very beginning. Even in 1907, the Romanian historian Nicolae Iorga came to Istanbul, and he's mentioning in his memoir that his guide was this Epaminonda Papacosta, and he makes a short portrait of Epaminonda Papacosta, mentioning that he's an womanizer, he's not a very serious person, he doesn't understand why he's working at the Romanian Romanian legation, And then when we look in the report of the colonel, actually it follows some patterns. So his lack of morality, also his very dubious activity and running black money and trying to sell oil and getting involved with the Russians as well. Everything was bad, let's say, in that time in Istanbul. It's put on the image of Papacosta as well. And involvement in 1919 with the Young Turks, especially, he's mentioning several times that he was a very good friend of Talat Pasha. And he was keep giving information to Talat Pasha and others, of course, not only directly about the war in Romania. So he was basically acting like a spy. We have all this level. Everything was already mentioned in Istanbul for different. We found a very good representation in this Epaminonda Papacosta. And of course, you cannot miss a woman in all this story and on this creating a portrait. He's blaming for everything the wife of Papacosta, who left for Romania in 1916, and she was working for the Red Crescent. And he's insisting that she was also the mistress of Talat Pasha. No idea if it's true or not, who cares, actually, or another Subi Bey, but she was one of the reasons why everything went bad. And he has this proof, this photo which was taken in Bucharest in 1916, and he's demonstrating that she's in the middle and surrounded by Talat Pasha and other representatives, of another proof that nothing is clear. And he managed also to determine some members of the community to write a report to the ministry and insist that he has to be removed and replaced with a professional diplomat. And they were also signing that, yes, he did all these parties during the war, he was selling things from the legation, which might explain why, checking the inventory later in interwar period, some things which were available in the legation before the war were not existing anymore. And well, of course, things had always something, a very small seed or a bigger seed of truth. And going back to the archives again, I understand that in 1920, Epaminonda was removed from the legation, and he was accused of many of the aspects mentioned in the report. He was doing deep analysis of his activity and trying to recover everything and to transform everything which was inside of the building, and to receive the archives, because apparently he was selling documents from the archives and so on and so on. So somewhere there, things were not as bright as they looked from the beginning on the special delegate of Romania. This is just one episode. That I said there are many aspects and a lot of materials available also concerning the Romanian subjects in the Ottoman Empire. Some of them I was mentioning a little bit earlier were prisoners, so a lot of correspondence on that. And again, the establishment or re-establishment of the legation, many aspects which demonstrate once again that the life of occupied Istanbul, it is visible also in the life of a small legation on Sıraselviler Jadesi, and definitely it's worth to continue to do research. And once again, I'm happy that I had this opportunity to look at this material, and I hope transform it at some point in a text. Thank you very much.